This was a bad idea from the start. Two reasons, really. Number one is that Raquel Welch seems to have absolutely zero sense of humor about herself. We all saw that episode of Seinfeld where she hospitalizes half the cast in a fit of rage when she's criticized about her dancing, right? That's playing to a common perception of her that I get the impression has more than a little truth. It seems like poor dear Raquel has put up with so much shit in her time as an entertainer to have developed a rather callous my way or the highway attitude when it comes to the material she will and won't consider. If she didn't think something was flattering or to her advantage to appear in, she simply turned it down, usually without apology, nicety, or reservation. I don't think it's fair to call that bitchy or unreasonable, but I don't get the feeling it's endeared her to lots of the folks with whom she's worked. The second reason it was a bad idea is that the writers of NBC Saturday Night, especially the rather more juvenile men's side of the writers' room, were in no way prepared or willing to work with such a host. I get the distinct impression that when Michael O'Donoghue sensed personal or professional boundaries in a host, he took it as a personal affront and challenge to be met. As for the rest of them, well, I'm afraid they just thought booby jokes were way funnier than they actually are, especially if they're being pitched to Raquel effing Welch, who, let's be fair, has probably heard them. When Welch turned down, for instance, a sketch pitched by Franken and Davis titled Planet of the Enormous Hooters, in which she'd be an outcast because of her tiny bosom in a society where everyone else had an even larger chest. Not only did Franken and Davis think she was being overly prudish, they didn't really make an effort to come up with anything different to replace it, just more boob jokes. The show had gotten just big enough by this point that they didn't feel as if they had to play nice with the host if they didn't want to, and perhaps they should have made more of an effort this week. The fact that they couldn't get on the same page with Welch really comes out in a lot of these sketches. Raquel Welch burst rather suddenly into the collective conscious when she appeared in a 1966 remake of the old Hal Roach film 1 Million BC, wearing only this deerskin bikini. The publicity still photograph and poster of Welch are widely seen as the only lingering legacy of this movie, funnily enough. She spent the next 10 years trying to take roles that offered her a little more range and prestige, but had largely been stuck with salacious parts centered around her looks. Perhaps the nadir of this period was when she portrayed the eponymous role of a transgender woman in 1970's critically mauled Myra Breckenridge, which Time magazine called as funny as a child molester, an insult to intelligence, an affront to sensibility, and an abomination to the eye. Read up on this one if you're into film production insanity, because it's quite a tale. What I mean to say by all of this biography is that Miss Welch had not exactly been in any huge or noteworthy film successes that would have led her to host the show, and was there seemingly on name recognition and her existing sexpot stardom. I hate to say it, but things get off on the wrong foot for me almost immediately. Welch dances out like she owns the place, then immediately begins complaining about last week's show not being sophisticated enough for her. She then proceeds to croon her way super seriously through a debt of Superstar with Belushi's Joe Cocker. He's, of course, wonderful, but she plays everything entirely too straight, even for the straight man in the sketch. This sets the tone, though, for what's to come. The host of a comedy show stubbornly failing to actively participate in any of the, jokes on the comedy show. If I'm not mistaken, this performance makes Phoebe Snow the first returning music guest. She was also on the quite strange all-musical second show with Paul Simon. Snow was perhaps most widely known for her backup vocals on Simon's Still Crazy album, but she'd also had a top 5 hit the prior year with Poetry Man from her own debut album. She's here this time touring behind her 1976 disc Second Childhood, and she performs 2 cuts, a great mid-tempo jazz ballad called All Over, and an unfortunately titled but fun cut called Two-Fisted Blues. I find this sort of 1970s AM cheese wonderfully nostalgic, so this performance is delightful as far as I'm concerned. I love her, and I kind of want to listen to the rest of this album next time I'm on a long car trip. John Sebastian was one of the founders of important late 60s group The Lovin' Spoonful, who wrote such well-known songs as Do You Believe in Magic and Summer in the City. He left the group in 1968 to start a solo career, however, and is here on SNL solely on the strength of his recent chart topper, and I'm not kidding, the theme to the TV show Welcome Back, Kotter. If that manages to get you excited for his performance for some strange reason, like if you're some Welcome Back Kotter mega fan or something, I'm sorry to inform you, it's terrible, almost certainly the worst performance of the first season. First off, nobody seems to have told Sebastian about the whole live part of Saturday Night Live. There's a minor mistake at the beginning and some feedback, and he asks to start again on live TV. I mean, wow. The band keeps going, the whole thing falls apart, and they actually start it up again. It's absolutely the worst flub I've seen by a music guest so far, and I guess I'd mostly blame it on the poor mixing, but boy, did he really not handle a minor flub well, given the context. I imagine this probably caused them to need to cut something later in the show because there's no way the song was budgeted to go this long. Anyway, Belushi comes out midway through the song to hold John's harmonica for him during the solo, which is a nice touch, but then Sebastian keeps trying to get the damn crowd to sing along with him, and they're having none of it. It's a shame it goes so poorly because I'm embarrassed to admit I actually do like the song, but I can't wait for the performance to be over. Just one more awkward moment in a show full of awkward moments. Speaking of awkward, here's a serviceable but nasally and thin rendition of Ain't Necessarily So by our host. At some point in the week, the writers had just had enough of Welch and surreptitiously banished her to work on this segment with Paul Schaefer just to get her out of their hair. My guess is Welch must have demanded to sing the song in the first place, because I can't imagine anybody on the show asking her to do it, and she frankly doesn't have the voice to pull it off. She even ends on a long, held-out flat note. Poor form from a pretty poor host. The phone cold open is a vibrator joke this week.
No, it's just out of batteries. Listen, take the electric toothbrush. I gotta go.
I really do wonder how they got some of these on the air in 1976. I'm Chevy Chase, and "you can't" is a good garbling of the catchphrase. It pleases me that they were so readily willing to subvert themselves in anything that proved popular on the show. Ford has received criticism for his appearance on and endorsement of a late-night program which specializes in bad taste, cheap shot humor, and filthy language wherever possible, Chevy reports. And then makes fun of Ford's stupidity a little bit for good measure. I'm not sure whether being on SNL really hurt Ford at all, but I do know he got beat by Jimmy Carter, so the whole Nesson debacle must not have helped much. We have a Carter joke, not nearly as mean-spirited as most of the Ford jokes, frankly. I don't think they were necessarily trying to play with kid gloves, but Carter just didn't have much to poke fun at this early in his national political career. I'd wager he was a largely unknown factor to Chase, Franken and Davis, and O'Donohue at this point, but I could be wrong about that. George Wallace is pictured holding a screaming baby, and Chevy of course suggests that Wallace was crushing the child. They hate Wallace, aren't afraid to show it, and I condone this heartily. Lorraine with Election 76 analysis of the don't knows who answer every poll question with don't know. It's a good gag, but I can't help but feel like Lorraine is completely stuck playing the same newscaster lady every single episode. She nails the stereotypical voice though, as always. We have the first of Gilda's Bob Wah 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 bits, an interview with Garrett about her leaving NBC for ABC. It's every bit the broad impression I'd expected, but pretty on point. She claims she's leaving NBC because of how Tom Snyder's haircut makes it to where you can't see his ears. As a big Snyder fan, this is hilarious to me, the idea that somebody would be so irrationally bothered by his doofy haircut that they'd make a major career move to get away from it. The Update commercial break, another bisexual minute parody, features Welch as Gore Vidal in a frankly marvelous Stars and Stripes outfit, which is a reference to one she wore in Myra Breckenridge. The background for this is the film had actually been an adaptation of a much better received Gore Vidal book of the same title, and Vidal famously went on talk shows and pleaded with viewers not to go see the movie, which he found a travesty. I have to admit I didn't understand the context of this sketch on first viewing and found it bewildering. Even with context, however, it's not funny. Welch's reading of the lines is stilted, and there's no punchline to make the whole thing worthwhile. Finally, meteorologist Belushi talks about songs written about the weather. It's another in the line of his start softly, end up illogically enraged reports. By the end, he's positively apoplectic, screaming and yelling about how banal songs about the rain are, and suggesting way more hardcore versions that they should do instead. I can see why they keep coming back to this premise for Belushi's update stuff, but it also demonstrates the show's willingness, even early on, to return to ideas that had proved successful, perhaps a little too soon or too often. Weiss's film for the week is Welch dancing around in a sexy outfit. That's it. It's the sort of routine somebody might perform as a tryout for the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, and as subtle a use of the host as is possible. I'm quite certain some teenager somewhere watching this in their parents' basement in 1976 had a pleasant few minutes to themselves with some PG-13 wank material, but I can't say it does anything for me. She's not a very natural choice for host, so it doesn't surprise me that they had to resort to this sort of thing to pad the show out. This is actually almost poignant, at least to start with. The poor Muppets have one last talk with their god, the mighty Favad.
You want your God's advice?
No, please, please, oh please, oh please.
Don't beg. My advice is, forget it.
Forget it. No. What do you mean, forget it?
I mean, forget it. Pack it in. Quit.
He says it doesn't hurt to just get in the trunk and call it quits, because puppets don't have feelings. They climb in, provide jokes that maybe he'll try his hand at hosting, and we fade to black. If I hadn't been eagerly awaiting their demise all season, it'd be almost wistful. Jim Henson would, of course, go on to much greener pastures. The Muppet Show started just a few months after this episode aired and ran for 5 successful years, so I don't think anybody could possibly be upset that their involvement with SNL ended when it did. They'd served their purpose for the show as initial name recognition, and it's for the best that it ended here.
And now our final category.
The cold open is Chevy doing an award show parody where the nominees are all politicians from the 1976 elections. The gags are okay, very topical, but then the sketch goes off rails when Chevy's handed the envelope with the winner. It just says, "Take the fall, Chevy," and he gets upset. Then he breaks the fourth wall and complains about being typecast as the fall guy before taking a fall and introducing the show. They think they're being more clever than they are here, but I do enjoy this type of humor.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
In which Chevy, as the Pied Piper, pitches Purina Rat Chow. It's a cute premise, and it made me giggle, even though it's gross. Before the era of deregulation ushered in by Reagan, the U.S. government had signaled its intention to begin using metric as the official units of measure in our trade and commerce. Considering the metric switchover mentioned here never actually happened, though, this is an especially dated and strange premise for a sketch. Nevertheless, Danny introduces the decabet, which is like a metric alphabet. He's great as the presenter, and it's a pretty good length. I don't foresee much success for this decabet, though. This one-joke sketch actually created quite a bit of kerfuffle for the network and its lawyers. The gag is that a bunch of downhill skiers get shot during the event by French pop singer and actress Claudine Lange, who had recently been arrested for allegedly shooting and killing her lover, pro skier Vlad Spider Sabic. I mean, it's in pretty poor taste, but considering the matter had still not gone to trial, it was also legally fraught to make a claim about the purported guilt of Lange, whose lawyers demanded a retraction. The following week, Don Pardo read a slightly sarcastic statement on air, the show's first public apology. For what it's worth, Lange claimed the shooting was accidental, but was convicted of negligent homicide, for which she was sentenced to only 30 days in jail. Many who studied the case believe she did in fact purposefully murder Sabic and got away with it because of shoddy police work. Here we have another Polaroid ad, this time rather cleverly poking fun at the whole situation. Belushi introduces himself as Jane, and Jane refers to him as such throughout the advertisement. Belushi frankly looks like he can barely contain his indignance at being asked to appear in this segment in the first place, but hey, easy drug money. More great moments in herstory. I hadn't really anticipated these being strong enough to reappear after the first one, but oh, I see. It's an excuse to make smarter boob jokes, which Welch would actually play along with. Here she plays Jane Russell, another actress known for her large bosom, and Aykroyd plays Howard Hughes, who was by all accounts rather obsessed with Russell. Hughes has designed a revolutionary bra for Russell, see. This is a reference to an instance in which Hughes actually did design a special bra for her to wear in a movie, which would look less noticeable under the sheer top she was wearing and make her breasts seem more bare. Geez, I never knew Hughes was such a skis bag, but you should read up on this stuff if you're similarly ignorant as I was. It's pretty wild. Anyways, the bra he designs has got freaking propellers on it. Subtle, right? Aykroyd tests it on her and is, of course, overcome by its power. Long way to go for this silly gag, and I'm quite certain the references to Russell and Hughes were lost on many in the audience as they were on me. Probably the only fondly remembered moment from this particular episode, here we have Lorne Michaels' famous offer to the Beatles to reunite on SNL for the staggeringly paltry sum of $3,000. It's pretty widely known at this point that, of course unbeknownst to anyone on the show, Paul McCartney was actually visiting John Lennon in New York on the night this aired, and that they'd considered booking it down to the studio just to see what would happen. Of course they didn't make it. If you'd like to see a wonderful, if slightly fictionalized retelling of the event from John and Paul's perspective, I recommend the old VH1 flick Two of Us, which is available in low quality here on YouTube. Lorne would get a beetle soon enough, and they'd reference this sketch again when George Harrison eventually appears. In which Welch plays Nurse Ratched, who won't let the bees watch the Oscars. I can't say I truly get all the humor here, having never seen the movie. It hardly matters, though. Welch has the charisma of shower tile mildew, and Chevy is doing a borderline offensive comedy Mexican accent that I just can't move past. They keep having audio issues this episode, too. The mics are feeding back. This is probably the worst award thing winner, tied with Welch's musical number. In which Gilda claims to not only have seen Raquel Welch naked this week, but also to have the exact same body as she does. We have the exact same parts, Gilda says, only mine need a little regrouping. I got a chuckle out of this, and I wholeheartedly endorse the sentiment about positive body image. It might have come across more strongly, however, had Gilda not been introducing Wise's objectifying Hoochie Coochie Girl film when she made it. For the closing bit, we have Chevy, again, pestering Raquel to take her shirt off, this time by telling her they've received a telegram from a dying man and it's his last request. She rips her shirt open to reveal a blue halter top, and after a second or two of technical fumbling, it becomes apparent that the reason the shirt is blue is that they're supposed to be using it like a blue screen onto which they project footage of a rocket launch. The technical glitch kind of makes the joke fall flat, but I suppose it's an okay idea. The studio audience seems extremely confused, though, which makes sense, as I'm sure there weren't monitors around for them to see what the effect looked like on TV. All in all, a janky end to a janky show, certainly one of the least enjoyable of the first season for me. Next week is a step up, but not a large one. Host Madeline Kahn didn't feel very comfortable on live TV, and I'm afraid it was rather obvious she didn't enjoy herself. There's still some good material, though, so stay tuned.